job is to create the best environment for others to be successful. We're enablers, or should be enablers and facilitators, as much as we are leaders.
Welcome to Arts Engines. I am your host, Aaron Dworkin, and with us as today's guest, we have Matthew Van Besien, who serves as president of the University Musical Society here in our hometown of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Matthew, it is great to have you on the show.
Thanks. It's great to see you, Aaron. I must get the award for having traveled the least today.
Exactly. So, well, it's so great to have you on the show. You obviously bring a host of, experiences, not only at UMS, but obviously, especially in the orchestral world, New York Philharmonic, et cetera. So I thought I would just dive right into an issue that I know is so pressing for so many of our viewers, whether they be practitioners, whether they be presenters, whether they be any arts leader, which is this kind of pseudo-digital world we're living in, right? Where it seems like everyone is trying to kind of make ends meet and experiment in different ways. Some people seem to do better than others. So I really wanted to get into this sense of the digital space. And I thought I'd start off by just simply asking, what is UMS doing right now in terms of how you present artists? How are you doing that with the pandemic?
Yeah. Well, look, the digital space was, I think for us this year, born initially out of necessity, and for all of us right now, right? We've been sort of forced into the digital frame, maybe far, far more than we've ever embraced it. And yet, I think that there's some wonderful learnings from this. I think there's some silver linings, and I think there's some things that we can adapt and think about for the future for sure. At UMS specifically, we have not had a live in-person performance in an indoor venue since March. So that probably doesn't differentiate us from all of our colleagues out there in the arts world. We were able to do some outdoor in-person community engagement activities in the summertime. But as you know well, here in Ann Arbor, the weather changes quickly and outdoor becomes sort of a non-starter pretty quickly. And in fact, I should note that both of us are in the same climate together. Aaron, of course, looks much more like he's on a tropical island, and I look I'm really bearing down for winter. But difference in thermostat settings, obviously, in our household.
Exactly. I keep the studio at 77. So.
I'm coming over to your studio after this is all over. But what we've done, we knew we wanted to embrace the digital frame. We knew that we wanted to continue to engage our audiences and engage the communities that we work with and that we, try to both entertain and inspire every year. And we knew that we wanted to continue to invest in artists. So we've tried to approach digital work less about reimagine, or less about a substitution for live in-person performance, because I think you and I could both agree, or hopefully would agree, that there really isn't a substitution for that shared live in-person experience. However, the digital frame allows you to do a lot of creative things. So we're trying to use it with artists, investing in artists to help them bring our audiences into their creative process and how they work as much as their work itself.
Gotcha. And so could you give us an example? How do you actually make that happen? So if others are looking at it either as an artist or as a presenter, what are the functionally, what are some ways to make that happen?
So there's two primary ways that we're in the digital frame this year. One is what we're calling kind of informally our digital pivots. So I know pivot is an oft-used phrase in this time. So how do we think about things that were on our season that we might offer in a digital way? Again, not so much as a substitute, but as a way to engage our audiences. So like the Talkbacks String Quartet's a good example. Pretty straight ahead, they performed a beautiful concert from Boulder for our audiences, specifically for our audiences. But on the other side of the spectrum is our digital artist residencies that we started. So we chose 6 artists and/or ensembles that we wanted to invest in over the course of this entire season, to work in the digital frame, to create, to think and explain their creative process, to engage with our audiences. And sometimes it's a whimsical idea. So we have some other bigger projects in the digital frame, but for instance, Joyce DiDonato, she is doing a whole series of short videos that are really about engaging society musically, but also philosophically about democracy, about loss, about themes that are really, really important and resonate with all of us. So that project is called Songs of Today.
Awesome, awesome. So as you kind of look at how this is, kind of being created, I'm always curious from the artist presenter standpoint, right? Are there things that artists can do that can make themselves more, desirable to work with, right? Are there things, I'm curious for all the artists watching, so many feel frustrated and, what can I do? I cannot do, what I used to do. Are there suggestions or things that you look for when you see artists out there that, wow, you know what, that's something, let's potentially, do some exploration there?
Well, the boldest example that we've had the privilege of exploring is with actor Wendell Pierce. And I know you know Wendell and actually moderated a discussion including him for the University of Michigan's DEI Summit. And Wendell is a great example. First of all, we were, and I don't want to use the word in a flip sort of way, but lucky in some ways to have this kind of moment to engage with Wendell. He was in New Orleans at his home with his 95-year-old father. And in some ways we were able to really spend some serious time talking with him about what he'd like to explore. And so it means for the artist that it's both about opening up the range of possibilities that you're willing to explore and then providing a whole lot of flexibility to explore them. So again, I think this is a great example of flexibility that's born out of necessity, but in fact, when we hopefully have some degree of normality again, that flexibility, I hope that we don't lose that flexibility, either as arts organizations or for artists themselves. So Wendell, of course, as we're speaking now, we are either have or are preparing to launch a filmed theatrical presentation with Wendell and another actor, Charlie Robinson, called Some Old Black Man. And it required them to come here to Ann Arbor, quarantine, being tested regularly, a whole set of protocols that were developed by the Screen Actors Guild, and then to go on set with, again, all these protocols and testing to create a filmed theatrical presentation in the time of COVID. And I dare say Wendell was an incredible visionary about this, but it also stretched him and us in a way, again, born out of necessity, but seizing the opportunity.
Awesome. Awesome. So I wanted to just touch on now a little bit looking forward. So this is kind of this work that you're doing now. And, if we could assume that, vaccines come, everything goes, great over spring going into summer. Now we're actually looking at 21, 22, or maybe even 22, 23, the new normal.
Right.
Do you have any sense of which one of these changes will remain the same? What's your sense of what will kind of retroactively go back to kind of how things were, and what do you think permanently will really remain different?
And you're asking kind of specifically about the digital space or broadly?
Sure, or broadly as well. But I was thinking initially with the digital space, but definitely feel free to take that as broad as you would like.
Well, look, in the digital space, for sure, I think it will just become a much more prominent part of what we do. And I think all of us have realized that, just practically speaking, we probably don't need to be on a plane quite as often as we were previously. And there's an efficiency about using the digital frame that we probably weren't really optimizing before. Having said that, I think the artistic components, I think for us as a presenter, one of the challenges that we have at UMS is that we really bring the world's best here to Ann Arbor, but sometimes we have them here for less than 24 hours on the ground. And so the challenge for us has always been, how do we create impact beyond the stage for artists? And I think the digital frame really makes a range of things possible for days, if not even weeks, leading up to a main stage performance, and possibly even on the back end in terms of artist talkbacks and exploration. We all know the challenge of trying to get, especially a company of artists, give a riveting, emotionally wrought performance, and then trying to get them to please come and sit on the stage and do a talk back to the audience before, right? There's something wonderful about that and cruel and unusual about that at the same time. But what if we could actually do a series of talkbacks even before the work happened, or certainly had a pre-recorded set of talkbacks ready to go for our audiences afterwards? So I think what it can do is actually, for us at UMS, is really increase the footprint that artists and the impact that artists can have here with us. And then to say nothing of the fact that I think the digital frame allows us to simply interconnect and connect more with one another. When you're not in New York or not in Berlin or something like that, doesn't mean you can't be there to connect with those artists now. And we now know how to do that and do that much better.
Awesome, awesome. So we're beginning to get short on time, and I always like to hear on Arts Engines, really also give our audience a sense of the arts leaders who are coming on the show. So just in terms of your own sense of leadership, as you're leading, especially during these turbulent and unpredictable times, where do you kind of find your own inspiration when on that day when you realized you had to, cancel a season, or, have to have, discussions with artists that could be very difficult, or key constituents, and there's going to be those really, really tough times? Where do you go for solace, for inspiration?
Wow. I mean, and I think many of us have needed both inspiration and solace in these past months, in the sense of loss, in the sense of trauma, in the sense of just utter disruption to our arts world, but to people's lives and to our communities. There's kind of two parts. One's a little bit more serious and one's a little less serious, but I have some core principles that I really stay close to, and they're things that I learned as a musician in my early days. So always paying attention to the fundamentals, the basics of what we do, the core principles. It's just like being a musician. Those fundamentals will get you to the hard stuff much more easily. I think our jobs as leaders really is to create, our job is to create the best environment for others to be successful. We're enablers, or should be enablers and facilitators, as much as we are leaders leading. Always thinking about the fact that there are multiple sides to every issue, and being empathetic. And I think in no time can I think of in my life in which empathy was more needed and more necessary in this world. So I really force myself to come back to some of those core principles I've learned, and I've learned them from extraordinary people who gave me the privilege of learning from them along the way. And then you just need, I think we've all needed both moments to learn and reflect. And then I think we've just needed moments to be entertained and escaped. And I was thinking about this the other day, that when I was first started out as an executive director, I was 35. I was in Houston. It's a little bit like being a young musician. You really don't know what you're doing, so you're not very scared of it at that point. And I used to watch The West Wing a lot. But The West Wing was popular at that time, and I still love The West Wing, but I actually think there are really great leadership issues. And the show has some dated components now, things that I think are culturally a little dodgy and inappropriate these days, but there are some really wonderful moments of inspiration and humanity and leadership in a show like that. And not to steer into the political side of things, but I think it's really about tapping into our better nature as people and as people who are trying to accomplish things for the greater good of society.
Wow. Well, it is just inspiring to hear your story, and especially, your example of leadership, which is so powerful, and UMS, which is not only a wonderful institution here in Southeast Michigan and a leading presenter for the country, but also one of our creative partners, which has been such a help to Arts Engines. And so Matthew Van Besien, you truly are one of the great arts engines who is powering human creativity in our field. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for doing this and connecting everyone during this time.